So we must do two things, two great things together to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself.
So then we come to that D on the level of Christian Science, and we said that A, B, and C reflect in some degree the Word, the Christ, and Christianity, and now we'll see that D has a touch of science to it. Why? Because it is science that shows us the equipollence of God. That equipollence of God, a balance of statement. So there's something here that has to do with a balance of statement. It's not going to be something that jolts us and says, oh, I guess there is an opposite, and here it is, and it's big and mighty, and gosh, there are two things, and we're taking one thing and we're trying to get power over the other thing and wipe out the other thing. This isn't the way it is. You see that really our structure, our framework is never introducing a second value, a second set of values. Only one set of values, 7 and the 4 and the 4, and that now we come to a standpoint of consciousness that has to do with seeing not that there is a second set of values, but of seeing what mind is not, you see. So we are going to see in a certain language, in a language that is adapted to a consciousness that has been resolving the claim of duality, what is really being stated. What is really being stated. So it's a balance of statement. We never get out of balance in that design of being. You see that all through this flow, this model, this design, we have been seeing what God is all through, from science to divine science, to absolute Christian Science, to Christian Science, as the A and the B and the C is a beautiful statement of what God is. We've seen it as mind. And now we get that balance of statement, stating the same thing but in a different language, of what God, mind, is not. Okay? So that if we have that living consciousness, the living consciousness of science, of divine science, of absolute Christian Science, and of the A, the B, and the C in Christian Science, if we have a practicing consciousness within ourselves of these levels and this calculus of mind, then there's no possibility that we can come to any scientific conclusion except that there is no mortal mind. There is only one mind. That's the conclusion. And so what we see is again that relationship between the first and the second records of creation, that relationship of the equipollence of God. Didn't we say that? The I am mind. Mind saying what? I, mind, am. That's the first record. And then I, mind, saying what? I am not. At the very same time that mind says what it is by definition saying what it is not, you see. And that's the role that the second record plays, to show us in a different language of consciousness the very same message, the very same statement, what mind is, through the statement, what mind is not. Well, I always feel that I do an inadequate job of explaining that absolutely profound concept of the equipollence of God. And I guess it's because we can only really touch that through our own conscious experience. It's like those gifts that we were talking about, that it breaks in on you, and only the Christ knows when that whole consciousness of the oneness and onlyness and allness of love, of being, will break in and touch you and begin to establish itself, and it knows how to come and to become more and more certain and definite within us. So we have the I am mind saying what mind is, and at the same time saying what mind is not. I am not mortal mind. I'm not in ignorance. I'm not halfway knowledge. You see, if we descend in that flow of consciousness from science all the way through, from the science level all the way through, that is the consciousness we have. We see, mind is not mortal mind. There is no mortal mind. There is no ignorance. There is no halfway knowledge. There is no sensuous reason, no petty intellect, no scholasticism. You see, it's so beautiful to see that is a very, very high state of consciousness, and so we get it at the point of D. We get it as a touch of science, a very high standpoint of science. I love that second record because it shows us through those 7 great statements what doesn't work, you see. What is destined to go out. Because when something doesn't work, when it fails, then we turn to that which does work. It has the Christ within it. It's cybernetic. You see, when something doesn't work, you are getting feedback, and you reevaluate your input. You look at your input again. You adjust it. It's an adjustment thing. This is cybernetics. Every one of us does it. We never stay with something that doesn't work in any department of life, do we? And if we try to, what happens? The Christ makes us so uncomfortable in that standpoint that is unprogressive and unproductive, that we are forced by the love of the Christ to change. That we are forced to accept that which best promotes our growth. So every one of us goes through this fourfold process. And each one of those statements you see in the second record is showing us what doesn't work. The first statement shows us that a supposed standpoint of mortal mind doesn't work. Ignorance doesn't work. So we are driven, every one of us, you see, is driven as Adam was driven and Cain was driven. Cain was driven out, and Adam was driven to a whole new basis, a whole new basis of input, and so began again on a higher level. That's all that story is about, and it's a microcosm of the experience that each one of us has. We all have our life experience really to show us what doesn't work, to show us that mind is not mortal mind, not the human mind, so that we can begin to see what does work. That it's really the calculus that is training us and showing us what is not in alignment with the calculus, and what is in alignment with the calculus. And that Christ calculus is correcting our course. It does it cybernetically. And I was just going to remind you of my favorite story about Edison and how he tried apparently 200 and some ways, I think it was 273 ways, to make a light bulb. Only the last one worked. So every time something didn't work, he learned more, you see, about what not to do. It's the equipollence, what not to do, and what to do. It's a steering thing that is going on, that we're being led, we're being steered. And every time something seems to fail, it's a success. It's a success when it fails. It's a success to find out what doesn't work, isn't it? Huh? Mm-hmm. Love that. So it's driving you closer and closer and nearer to the success of the ideal solution. So just keep that in mind, that D is showing you the other side of that equipollence coin. And so the counterfeit, that which doesn't work, we see, is, well, from the standpoint of the Word now we're going to see that D through the Word, the Christ, Christianity, and science. And from the standpoint of the Word then, that which doesn't work is heredity. You see that that's the opposite of the growing understanding that we have but one parent, and that's the parent mind, and that we have no grandparent. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that beautiful that we have no grandparent mind? We have only a parent mind. It's always that direct relationship to the parent mind. There never ever has been a law of heredity, never an ancestral line from which we could draw anything. We have that direct one-to-one relationship with the parent mind, and so heredity is out of the question. It doesn't work. And we have to drop that as some kind of a thing that we all fall back on, oh, my mother this, and my father that, and, my grandfather had beautiful eyes, and my father had good teeth, and all these things that we like to draw upon that because we think it's a positive thing, and we're really quite proud, that my grandfather had beautiful eyes, and see, and then we're really saying, see my eyes, like my grandfather's. But when it comes to something negative, we're not so happy about that. We don't want that. And when it comes to something negative, we want to turn and go to the parent mind and look at the parent mind and find out what the truth is. So we have to drop it all. We can't have a halfway knowledge, you see, about that one mind. So we've got there, what did we take up? Mortal mind, ignorance, you see, halfway knowledge, and so forth, heredity. Now, then we come to the brain, you see, that mind is saying, I'm not the brain. I'm not heredity, I'm not the brain. That brain being the claim of being a seat of knowledge. And we see that mind itself is the seat of knowledge. It's the basis of intelligence. It's the primordial conception. Everything begins in mind. It doesn't begin in the brain. It doesn't start in the brain. Mind is outside of the brain. one sees really such a change in many, many fields in respect to this question of the brain and of consciousness, you see, of where mind is, of where consciousness is. There are changes coming into the medical field, coming into psychology, in respect to this study of the brain and consciousness and intelligence. Belief is changing. Those beliefs are changing. How the belief about the brain is changing, and that they begin to see that the mind and consciousness are not in the brain. You know that they even say that in the world today, that you have a certain group of scientists that are avant-garde, that are on the cutting edge, and these are the ones who will tell you straight out that consciousness is not in the brain, that the mind is not there. And strangely enough, you know, they even come up with evidence for it at their own level of evidence. They begin to find evidence for the things that we know to be true in the science of being. It's a lovely thing going on in all these fields. And so we see there too that drugs are a counterfeit of mind. Mind says, I am not a drug, I'm not drugs. It's that claim that something else would work or could work besides the medicine of mind, the allness of the medicine of mind. And then if we look at the Christ and ask the Christ about mind and the equipolence of mind, what mind is not, then we see that it is not intelligent matter, that mind is not intelligent matter. Why we have intelligent matter there, you see that that the textbook says that would be the subjective state of mortal mind. And the Christ has all to do with subjectivity, and that's why I have put that term, that counterfeit, there at the point of the Christ. Mind is not intelligent matter. And we have those further terms, animal magnetism. I'm not animal magnetism. I'm not mental influence. Animal magnetism is a suggestion of another influence than the influence of the one mind, the power of the one mind. And you recall that right above we had that divine influence coming in, breaking in. Now we see that it uncovers and brings to light what is not the influence of mind, so that we can say, this is not mind, this is not mind, all the way through a great statement of the equipolence of mind. So you know that animal magnetism is very much a claim at the point of the Christ, because it's a claim of power also, of false power, of mental power, and of a mental influence. You also have there accident, you see. You have nerves. Accident being the claim that something can go wrong, whereas we see and very often refer to mind as being unerring, and I just realized that we don't have that in our framework here. We did not take that idea of the unerring mind. What would that be, really? The way that mind comes to us and breaks in on us, so we could have it in the A and under the Christ, that mind never makes a mistake, cannot make a mistake. It's not possible, therefore, for there to be an accident. An accident indicates that there could be some kind of a mistake. And in mind, where everything is known and all action is the action of mind, there is nothing that can go wrong or be mistaken. So beautiful. And nerves, you see, claim to be the channel from the brain the channel that manifests what the brain is thinking and feeling and creating and directing, you see, the body to do. And so it's a counterfeit really at the point of the Christ, the claim that there could be any other means of expression but mind's own means of expression, mind itself, and nerves are not the means, the true means of expression. And at the point of Christianity, what do we have? You see that we have illusions. Mind says, I am not illusion. I am not mind's many. And you hear that you get really an outcome sense. If we look at the whole range of the counterfeits, we see that illusions are coming in here as the counterfeit of ideas, and that realm of ideas, the ideas of mind, of the metaphysics of mind, of that image of mind, so that mind and its image and its images as ideas are the fact about illusions and about mind's many. And that brings us to the standpoint of science in the D, mind as science. Science looks and sees all of those things that are not science, but that are isms and ologies and false systems. And you see that we have, therefore, from the perspective of mind, those isms and ologies that are the counterfeit of mind. Mesmerism. You see, that claim of some kind of a mind, false mind science. Hypnotism. See, a claim of there being a science of mental control and manipulation. All those false systems that claim to influence, that claim to heal, that claim to be a mental power. They claim to have intelligence, to be able to sway us in one or another way, to do something for us or against us. And so science says, I am not. This is what I am not. I'm not mesmerism or hypnotism. Astrology, you see, that again is another false system from the standpoint of mind. It's that particular ology that tells us that we can know something through the stars and that we can be influenced by the stars, by the planets, that there's a system of stars and planets that creates a whole system of influence, and that would be able to dictate who you are and what you are and at what particular point you come on the human scene, and that everything is determined by that point in time, that it determines what you will be and the experiences that you have. And so mind says, no, this doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. That's not what I am. That's what I am not. So we have to go back and start with mind. If something comes up that seems to be real in that realm of the suppositional opposite, and we have to maintain that practice. Now, you see, we've been given now our practice. We know what our practice is. It's the flow of this design of being. You have a practice now. You have a practice of mind, capital M. And so go back to that and start with science itself and take that calculus of mind at the standpoint of science itself and flow. And flow through that calculus and let that calculus lead you then to divine science, to the calculus of divine science, and on to the calculus of absolute Christian science and of Christian science. And you will begin to gain your dominion. You see, we will gain our strength and our power over anything else that claims to be a power or a reality. So that would be mind, and we took a long time with mind because mind sets the pattern for everything that will follow, all the remaining synonymous terms with their ideas. And it seems that whenever we take mind and begin with mind, we have all these many, many wonderful, deep-rooted fundamentals that come in and that are necessary to the understanding of every further synonymous term. And that's a good thing, and we won't have to repeat all of that. We will have it now as a basis. That's what mind is giving us, the basis from which we can work. Let's see. Yeah. Mind is not scholarly attainment, not scholasticism, you see. It is mind science and the mind of Christ within us is the means. So mind will answer through its science that claim of agnosticism, which is a false theory about God from the standpoint of mind, namely the claim that we cannot know God and that God cannot be known. Mind deals with all of that.